Mary Beth, I'll start with you. Tell me what your department does to protect soft targets.
It'll be okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I think I'll start by saying that we're always learning in the Department of State and the Bureau of Counterterrorism. And primarily we focus on restricting the ability of terrorist organizations, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and others, from operating. So our efforts are mainly focused on restricting their funding, their ability to inspire and instruct and organize and execute. And we do that both at home and overseas. And since I'm with the Department of State, my focus is on working with international partners. And primarily, we work to engage with international partners so that we can produce good practices, recommendations, tools, and resources, not just for government, but also for industry. Because protecting soft targets is ultimately a shared responsibility. We've heard this morning about how terrorists continue to target public spaces where civilians gather. And we know that these spaces are designed to be open and accessible. We want them to be open and accessible. So the idea is to work better together to improve awareness and preparedness. So my focus, again, is working with international partners who have a wealth of experience and expertise. So as long as we continue to share, and as terrorist tactics evolve and change, we can improve our resources and do better together.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We'll come back to you in a second. Mr. Mirish, coming from far away, about 15 hours flight to Tel Aviv. Thanks for joining us. Tell us of your experience coming from a relatively small city of Beverly Hills, but still having your tool, your application that enables you to do what we speak of today, to do it practically. How is it being done, and what did you study out of it?
Well, first of all, we may be far away physically, but we're actually fairly close when it comes to, I guess you could say, the emotional center of Israel. We're actually probably the only city I can think of outside of Israel that has a Jewish majority population. And we're a very well-known city as well. And, but like charity, security begins at home. And while we're obviously concerned, and we have a cooperation with Department of Homeland Security about potential terrorist threats, as we saw now in Argentina, there was an attack on the chief rabbi. They're debating whether it was a hate crime or not. Well, it really doesn't matter. We want to stop those kinds of crimes before they happen. And so we have our own police force, as many cities in Southern California do, and we give them a lot of resources. So if anyone calls 911, our emergency number, they can expect emergency response time within 2.5 minutes. Someone's going to be there quickly. Another thing that we're doing, as we've also seen that they're doing in Tel Aviv, is we're installing security cameras throughout our city. Now, these obviously mainly have a forensic role right now, but hopefully in the future, they will have a role in stopping crime as it happens. So we do essentially what the minister said. We have a physical police presence in our business district. We have officers on bicycle. We don't have beat cops like New York does, but we're a walkable city, but they're visible. We have a lot of patrol police. We're using technology to increase security. The cameras, as said, which we use to not only for forensic purposes, but we use them to, we have automatic license plate readers, determine if there are people there who have a warrant out for them. And then finally also working with the Israeli Consul General, we have a lot of international visitors, the Department of Homeland Security. We work to assess threats and to stop them before they happen.
So let me just, a quick follow-up on the question on that, and how do you keep privacy of your citizens? Because up to now you gather information in order to protect them, but at the same time, they're entitled to have their security.
So we, for example, have a drone ban in the city. Now, private individuals can't do drones. You could imagine there'd be a lot of paparazzi wanting to look into the backyards of some of our perhaps more well-known residents. We only have cameras in the public right-of-way, and the feeling of many of our residents, including myself, is that when you're in the public right-of-way, you do not have the expectation of privacy. It's public, it's called public for a reason. So we're not gathering information from areas that would be considered private. Therefore, in my opinion, we don't really have a problem. I know you might talk to some civil rights advocates, but again, we live in a community. The word community implies there's something in common, and there's not that absolute right to privacy. Now, what happens within your house? None of our cameras look into people's backyards or into people's houses, and we want to make sure of that. But when you're on a public street, it is public.
Yeah, okay, so we will deal with that dilemma between public and private later on. I want to talk to you now, Asaf Talmon. How do you gather information? How do you protect cities, which is a big thing, obviously, and there are different ways and different tools and different dilemmas in doing so. I believe technology enables you to do things that you couldn't do 10, 20, 30 years ago, but still, it brings you other dilemmas at the same time. So what solutions do you offer to that new world?
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you. Yes, we have a big challenge when we are talking about technologies and how we can collecting information, we can keep the privacy issues relevant. We need to understand that today we have very good technologies and sophisticated, and we need to know how we create a good picture, but we know how to take it and create an effective, proactive solution and proactive operations in order to make sure that this tool that you get can help you to make a safe city much more protective. You need to know that cameras and any kind of equipment, it's a tool. These cameras and this equipment will not solve you the problem, and will most of the time can give you in a real time a picture, and in some times can help you to debriefing what's going on after any kind of attack, but it will not solve you the problem, which means we need to know to take all this data that our equipment collecting, but we need to know how to analyze it and to create a proactive active. Once you have changed the balance between our advisories and our security operations, which means we know on our advisories much more information that the advisories would like us to know, we change the game. This is the point. And once you are doing this, we have a sophisticated technologies and a good technologies, but we need to take it and create a proactive activities, and you can change it. And in technologies, we have a lot of equipment.
Can you go a bit into details in what exactly that you're doing? No, it's a closed room, Everybody keeps secret, it's Israel.
I will think on a good story and I will get back
Just
to
give
you.
us a hint of how, at the end of the day, there are security people who will deal with that and might be interested in such systems. So just to think of what is that. Think of that if it's possible later. Doron, I want to ask you, at the same time, there is one way to come from the municipality side. The other way is to come from the citizen side. I mean, he should be a partner. He's not your rival. He's not your enemy. You want to get him to work with you. How do you do it?
Yeah. Hello. I'm managing director in DeepSeek Intelligence, which is a subsidiary of SDMA Groups, which provide holistic homeland security services. I would like to share with you a unique model. And I would like to start with a bit strange of image, a deaf person. A deaf person, there is a phrase in Arabic, says, "Mithl al-atrash fi zafe." In English, which means like a deaf person in a wedding. A deaf person takes part in a wedding, but in fact is absent. Around him, people laughing, talking, joking, loud music, but he isn't a real participant. In parallel with his friend, with his deaf friends, he has a fluent, a perfect communication, and he prefers to be there. So the deaf person has an alternative experience. Like the deaf communities, exactly other minorities and groups in every city which feel alienated. Immigrants who suffer the barriers of culture and languages, areas of criminal areas, social and political unrest areas, and poor neighborhood. All of these communities and groups live in the city, but actually they live in their bubble. Our vision, and later on I will elaborate about the model, our vision is to promote social integration and to counter radicalization and any negative phenomenon by building bridges between those communities and the authorities. We strongly believe that effective dialogue is an essential element of security environment, not less than other security measures like cameras, law enforcement, and other, and even more. So we would like to enhance this vision.
Okay. Mary? It will be okay. At the end of the day, we will survive with the microphones. Mary Beth, I want to come back to you. I saw you writing a lot of remarks regarding what the gentleman sitting next to you were saying. What do you think of that? And more than that, do you see a global system that connects everything and everyone to work on that? Or do you see something that works only in the US or only in a single city? What's your vision on that?
Well, I was taking notes as I was learning from the other speakers about the creative technology solutions that they're developing, and just thinking how public-private partnerships can lead to a wide array of solutions, whether it's integrated exercises, common technology needs, greater engagement between small, medium, and large companies. Many multinational companies have greater resources and expertise. I think we're looking to ensure that in our domestic model that we're happy to share with others, that we're inclusive, so that we're giving the private sector and the individuals who populate those public spaces practical information and a realistic assessment of the threat, and helping them understand what to do during, before, and after an attack. In terms of our vision, I'd like to mention a couple of different resources that are out there. One is the Global Counterterrorism Forum. And first and foremost, I want to mention that all of the forum's work, the recommendations, the action plans, the good practices that they produce are publicly available on their website. And just 2 years ago, we wrote the first set of global good practices on soft target security. And I want to mention that my colleagues here from UNCTED actively participated in writing those, as did more than 60 countries and over 150 practitioners. And I would recommend you review those and use them and implement them. What's important about them is not only that they reflect the collective know-how of this massive community, but they're very current. They're just 2 years old, and as we continue to learn, we can update them. Those good practices also emphasize public-private partnering, and it it doesn't recommend public-private partnering. It explains the how-to. How to identify the stakeholders, how to organize useful activities for them, what type of information they could use, and also why businesses are a resource. They have expertise on their services, their products, their patrons, and their surroundings. So you can learn together and prepare better together. The other important revelation, I think, in the one-year process that it took to write those good practices is that many countries had plans to prepare for natural disasters or active shooter attacks or other types of violence or emergencies, but they weren't focused on this trend of targeting civilians. So we're encouraging companies to use all of the models out there and to use these good practices so that they can expand those plans to focus on soft target security. Most of the time, you're going to be working with the same communities of experts so that you can bring them together and not just look at response, but look more toward prevention and protection so that if an attack does occur, you can mitigate the impacts. So the GCTF good practices are one useful resource, and the other is a domestic resource that we just finished. And I say we, it was produced by the Department of Homeland Security, and it's called the Soft Target Security Resource Guide. Now, this guide reflects everything that we've learned both domestically and internationally. And this guide is also publicly available on the DHS website. And I imagine conversations with yourself and others that are working at all levels of government, what we've learned from you and from other stakeholders is reflected in that resource guide. So those are two items I'd like to recommend, but the conversation continues just like it is today, so we're all learning.
Perfect. So I want to ask you, do you think that you are protected? Can a city be protected in the new world? And what should we be protected for? Because it seems endless.
So as you know, in Israel, there is no such thing as 100% of anything. But the American equivalent of Yuli Edelstein, Tip O'Neill back in the day, said all politics is local. Well, security ultimately is also a local issue. And the more that we're aware of our own terrain, of our own residents, of our own unique circumstances, and this is one of the reasons I'm a strong believer in the value and importance of local control, the safer a city can be. We have elements at our disposal that national governments may not have. For example, we talk about Israeli technology and autonomous vehicles. Well, we're looking eventually at instituting a system of municipal autonomous shuttles. But we have the ability to layer on technology. One of the visions we've always had is that on these non-fixed routes, which from a security perspective is great because it's non-predictive, we could put cameras, and those cameras could be used for security purposes. Now, again, forensic, but ultimately, and this is something that separately from my work at the city we're developing, is the ability to look at that information, process it in real time, and use it to prevent crime.
But how do you, I think your experience is unique because of the unique situation of Beverly Hills. You've mentioned that the people living there, etc., were just out of the Oscar, you know, a day ago, so we're into
and
it.
An Israeli one, too.
An Israeli one, yeah, that's a big thing. Anyway, how do you get your people, your population to work with you? Because they're very rich, they live alone, they can buy everything. Sorry for that. How do you get them to work with you together?
So I know time's running short, but the thing is that is a stereotype. Actually, over 50% of we have a group of very famous and very wealthy people, but we're a very mixed city. I mean, we have a large Jewish population, but over 50% of our residents are renters. It's not just an enclave of the ultra-wealthy.
But can you get everyone to collaborate with you, to work with you?
I'll tell you, and this is what makes cities unique, and this goes to show the importance of cities. It's the meaning of community. We feel connected. We feel connected to each other. We're sometimes a dysfunctional family, but we are all in it together. And we have that feeling, and when you have that feeling, you can have a certain trust and collaboration with our police. There are cities in America where people see a police officer and they run the other way because of bad experiences. It's the opposite in our city. There has, since I grew up there, been a trust. And so therefore, the notion if you see something, say something, is something I think that is valid in our community.
What you've said is directly the main question in the image of police around the world, in Israel as well, whether you believe they work for you and you go to them, or they work against you and you run away from them.
We've integrated them into our community in such a way that people feel that they are part of the community. They're not just a force from outside. And that's an issue of training and picking the right people. That has always been extremely important to us.
Yep.
And I think it's a model that could be exported, because I see it in other cities in Southern California, and it is heartbreaking when you see the us versus them mentality.
Asaf, I want to come back to you. Do you have something from the private sector side to advise how you do it, how to get to where both Mary Beth and John want to reach? I mean, to that point, how do you do that, technology-wise, system-wise? And do you really need the citizens? Because technology enables you nowadays to do everything. You want to have them, but you don't really need them.
Okay, thank you. Just to continue what we said now, yes, it's totally understand, and I believe that the citizen can be part of the security, of the circle security. We are calling this a non-security community. Once you are design this and you explain and you recruit the people, and in Israel it's very nice to see it because this is part of our DNA in Israel. From the beginning, from the kids, from the schools, from the kindergarten, we educate our kids that security is important and they need to be circle of this, and they help us. Of course, it is not the same like adults and people who are involved in this, but this is part of the DNA of the Israeli citizens, and it's totally important, and we can get an effective issues because the non-security community is another's eyes and other circles that can help the security forces to protect, because they are not around all the places, and they can help us to bring some more information. This is one issue, and it's very important, and I think that non-security community, it's very, very important, can help us. Now on the privacy issues and the private sectors, you need to know how to take, again, as I mentioned before, to take the technologies and combine with the human resource. You cannot win the game alone just with technologies. Technologies is a tool. It will not solve the problem. You need a professional people, you need to train them, you need to recruit, you need to build a process, and you need to train.
But one follow-up question on that. How do you convince the citizen, the average citizen of each and every city that is being represented here around the world, that you're not you're not a big brother, you're not the enemy, but you're their friend? You work for them. How do you do that?
It's very difficult. Lotan operates in Europe, in several countries, and in several cities, and I must tell you the truth, it's difficult. Why it's difficult? But it's not part of the DNA. They are not understand, and it is not easy for them to believe that the security equipment and the special forces that come to help them and come to assist and come to make sure that we have much more safe life. This is the big point, and I must say that it's very challenging in several cities in Europe that we are at this moment operates, but it takes time and it's difficult, but you can do it slowly, but it's process. It's
Okay.
really process.
Doron, I come back to you. You said that you'll tell us of ways how to do it practically. So in a nutshell, because you know, as always, time is running short. Go ahead. No, take another microphone.
Our model deals exactly with the point of the collaboration between private sector, municipalities, and somehow the resident as well. Our model is based on a joint venture between a web analyst who can go deeper into the social media network to extract insight, and with a multidisciplinary team of experts of the municipality can compose or set strategic plan. The model is based on 4 steps. The first step is gathering and mapping in order to identify the language, the platforms, the key point over the social media networks, the trends, and so on. After we map the social media specifically in the target audience, I mean in the communities that we want to focus on, we are going to building or to create informal social map. And then we are identify the informal leaders, the go-tos, the real needs of the communities, and the influencers that can later on assist us to promote the municipality's interest and plan. The third one, after we gather all our insights, we are going back to the table with the team of experts from the municipality. They bring to the table also their insights, and together we set a strategic plan to promote what I mentioned before, a real social integration.
So we have to conclude shortly. So I'll start with you, private sector first, and then I'll come to you, John and Mary Beth. Those systems are big and expensive, which means rich and big cities will be protected, and the rest of the world won't. How do you level that at the end? Because we want to bring that, obviously, when the UN Security Council is involved and the State Department, you want to make it, at the end of the day, a global project, to be able to assist everyone. How do you bring that, how do you bring the news to places that it's harder for them to pay, it's harder for them to bring systems, it's harder for them to implement technologies, etc. How do you do that? Is it possible?
Yes, thank you. Totally, it's possible. Israel is not a rich country, and we know in our security.
I will argue that on that. Israel usually.
But yes, the point that we need to know that to make an effective security, you have 3 main pillars. One is technologies, one is the human resource, and one is the procedures. And technologies is just one of the pillars, but when you train your people and you recruit a professional people and you write the procedures and standard operational procedures, so this is not cost a lot of money. This is something cheap that you can recruit people, you can train people, and you can write the procedures. And together with the equipment that you are not buying the high-end solutions, and you can buy, something in the middle, they can give you a good picture and a good data. Together with all the 2 other pillars, you can get a fantastic solution.
Doron, 1 minute. Do you see, if I took you to 2030, 11 years from now, how would it look?
I believe that municipalities and residents as well understand that joint venture over the basic social network is a basic tool for all them both to promote their needs. On one hand, the priorities, the goals of the municipality, and on the other hand, the real need and the real challenges of the resident and communities discussed on a very clear and very, by the way, cheap infrastructure.
Okay, John, we spoke about that tricky word, trust. Trust between the organizations, between the systems, between you and the citizen, the average citizen. That's the key word, right? That's the key element, no matter where you live. How do you build that? What's your advice to everyone sitting here? Not all of them, Americans with your way of working, very, very strict and open. etc. How do you do that?
Well, like charity, security begins at home. And while we may take advantage of national resources, it really is something we need to build up locally, cooperating with regional, state, and national authorities. But it really starts from a sense of community. If the government is reflective of who the individual community is, and the sense that we are all in it together, and the sense that we are all connected, it will naturally follow. And that is the important thing. If people feel they're connected to a local government and they feel that it reflects them and who they are, they will naturally feel as part of a community that they can trust the leaders of that community to protect them, to work together, and to look after their interests. So really, that is something that needs to happen on a local level. And again, it's another reason why it goes back to why I think the concept of community with a capital C is so important. And in Israel, you have that sense as well. We look out for each other.
So Mary Beth, we'll conclude with you. Everybody during history wants to live in a safer world. That's a common wish. You oversee everything because, again, you come from the State Department and you oversee the world, and that's the way you look at things. Can this wish become reality because of the new technology, because of the ability to connect private, public sectors, etc., which wasn't as easy in the past? Can we do it, or will we still sit in panels in 10, 20, 30, 40 years' time and speak of that wish?
Well, I think it's always beneficial to have panel discussions. I think the engagements also need to stress an exchange between all the stakeholders. So national, state, municipal, provincial, local level stakeholders all have to have an opportunity to contribute to the conversation and to the solution. And I would also stress that our solutions will likely be low-tech and high-tech. And I think in my experience, as I've talked to many countries around the world, we need low-cost, no-cost solutions. So that might be better technology, but it's also models for how to organize better, how to exercise better, how to practice better, and what to talk about going forward.
So I want to say one more thing, of course.
I just wanted to add one thing. You asked if it can be a reality, and obviously being in Israel, I think of Theodor Herzl, and he once said, I think in German, wenn wollt, es ist kein Märchen. If you will it, or if you want it, it's not just a fairy tale. And I believe that is the case with urban
So
security.
I'll quote
as well.
our late President Shimon Peres, who used to say, if there is a will, there is a way.
Yes.
So I think it says the same thing. I want to thank our four panelists. Thank you very much.